We're here with James V. Gage, former mayor, village clerk, man about town.
Thank
and
you.
this year you're the commander of the American Legion Post.
Correct.
Where are we? What is
Well,
this setting?
We are in the museum of the American Legion, which was started in 1983. It's named after Pete Williams, who was a great benefactor of veterans when he was a supervisor and then when he was on the board, the legislative board of Ulster County.
Mm-hmm.
And named in his honor. And as you folks can see, as you look around, over the years, it's really enlarged. And we're very proud of this museum. And on Memorial Day, Veterans Day, following our services, we invite everybody in town to come on up and take a look at it. And most people are surprised at what we do have here. And very often we'll get a request from a Boy Scout trooper, a Girl Scout trooper, brownies, and they'll want to have a tour. So one of our two curators will give them a tour and explain everything that we have in the museum.
So it must be over 1,000 artifacts here.
Oh gosh, yes.
Ranging
well
from modern items, modern materials related to 9/11, going back to the Revolutionary War Code and Civil War Code, two very precious objects that you have in another room.
No question about it, yeah.
We're here to talk about just one or two little pieces of this museum, though. What you have in your hand now. What is this that we have?
This is what the ground observers wore on Nanny Goat Hill, where our headquarters were, and where people would observe planes going overhead, and they would track them, and they would call in a certain number, and from station to station, they would track a plane going or coming whichever direction it was going in.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember going there with my father probably in, I would say, maybe late 42, early 43, and then my dad got contracted tuberculosis, and then so my mother became a ground observer, and I remember going with her and sitting with her as she spotted the airplanes going overhead. It was very interesting for a kid 7, 8 years old at that time.
You were? Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And this is an armband, actually, or? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what they were. That's what it was.
And it
yeah.
says U.S. Army AWS Air Force Observer.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a little pin attached to it. I don't know if the camera can make it out, but that was the pin that was given to each of the observers as a sign that they were part of the Corps.
Right.
Right. Well, you were young, but you didn't go through the training, but you went with your mother, right?
Right.
Do you recall if she was with other people when she was here, when she was on the hill?
Most of the time, there were two people on duty.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And was she there during the day or during the evening or night?
I don't ever remember going at night with her. But they probably had regular scheduled shifts.
Right.
And because some people, had to work, and then they maybe became observers during their off hours,
I think it was a 2-hour shift around the clock. Mm-hmm.
I don't remember that, but you're probably right.
Do you remember Rita Gavigan in those days?
Oh, yes, sure I do.
She was more or less the supervisor or the person who was in charge.
Right. Well, Rita lived right across the street.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, she did, right in the Sweeney house?
I think.
No.
No, I got that mixed up. Her sister lived across the street.
That was Mary.
Mary, yeah.
Okay.
They were the Gordon sisters.
Right.
Mary and Rita Gordon, yeah, right.
Well, she had relatives around anyway. But,
Oh, yes.
Was there a building there in those days on Nanny Goat Hill?
The Observers Building.
The Observers Building. So it was
Yeah.
like a small square building with a wooden walk around it and with a rail.
That's right.
And it had some equipment inside.
Right.
Radios, I guess, or binoculars.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what they were. There was equipment there, and of course there were telephones, naturally. But
So your mother, though, what was your mother's name?
Elizabeth.
Uh-huh.
Everybody called her Lizzie.
Uh-huh.
Her maiden name was Lawless.
Uh-huh.
And
she did this during the war.
yes,
during
yes.
This most important part.
Yes. But as you and I mentioned before, as we talked, after the war, it continued on into the Cold War, into the early 50s at least.
Yes.
People were still doing that.
Was Lizzie still at it?
No. No.
Did you become an observer then during that period?
No, I was in the service for 4 years during that period.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I graduated from high school in '52, and I went right into service from high school.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I did a 4-year stint in the Navy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But the Ground Observers Corps continued,
Right.
or at least in some form.
Right.
I remember going there in '57 with Rita Gavigan. My mother said we had to go. Rita called. We have to go over to Nanny Hill.
Yeah, I'm not sure when they did discontinue it, but
Well,
I
it wasn't
didn't
for
realize-
that when we went. It was actually to see Sputnik
Oh, okay.
when that first came through.
All right.
But back in the '40s, though, there was a real concern that there might be an invasion, that the Germans, they were a huge military force, might somehow find their way over to attack America. In the '50s, what was the reason?
Well, the Cold War, they were afraid of what Russia might do.
The Red Scare and the...
You may continue.
You remember Ben Sanford?
I sure do.
And wasn't he the head of the civil defense program in the town?
He might have been. I really can't tell you for sure.
How do you know him?
I know Ben very well because of the fact that he was one of the first to be inducted into the Saugerties Sports Hall of Fame. Ben was probably the best bowler in Saugerties during his era of bowling.
Uh-huh.
And Ben was also a sharpshooter. He won many awards for pistol shooting, and he was also an instructor. He instructed and trained the local police, both village and town police, for years.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
well, in 1950, in December 1950, he gave a report on the civil defense program in Saugerties, and he said that with the international situation becoming increasingly grave, it was important for all the towns to become more involved. He said that Saugerties was a reception area for refugees in case New York City was bombed,
Okay.
and they were worried about an atomic bomb.
Oh, yes.
And I think that Saugerties was part of the comprehensive medical service plan for the New York City metropolitan area as well.
Well, there were a lot of shelters that went up in those days, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
We had a shelter in the municipal parking lot behind the hunting lodge.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
There was a shelter there. And
Oh, there was, huh?
people were having shelters in their own homes. They were in their basement and things like that.
Uh-huh.
Storing emergency stuff there because of the bomb scare.
So this was all pretty serious stuff.
Oh, yes.
With this observer corps and all that.
No
Yeah.
question about it. You know, it's interesting. Back in the 40s and 50s, as we said, we would track the planes mainly going up and down following the Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
what did we get on 9/11? We got the terrorists going down the Hudson, using the Hudson
You think
as their
that
guideline.
you think this could have been helpful in stopping that?
Wouldn't that have been something if we still had that going and we spotted them?
Isn't that
And then
something?
somebody else spotted them and said, hey, wait a minute, there's no planes scheduled to go down there.
Yes.
They could have shot them down if they're necessary, probably.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, there's a real example of why this type of a observer corps existed.
Right.
Of course, in different times you don't see things as the same. We certainly weren't as acutely aware of the threat as we were of the Red Menace in the 1950s.
Right.
The Legion is very active, though, in this town. What do you think should be done there? Should there be a monument or some way to acknowledge the Observer Corps' activities?
It looks like a big rock,
Yeah.
and it's got a nice scroll on it,
Mhm.
and it tells the history of the Palatines in that area. And we could do the same thing here.
Uh-huh.
Tell the history of the ground observers.
Mm-hmm. That's a nice thought.
Yeah.
Was there an honor roll or something there? Do you recall at some point?
There was an honor roll. Yes, there was. It was called. All the folks on Montgomery Street, their names were on the honor roll. Of course, there were several honor rolls around the village
Yeah.
and probably the township as well. I remember another one right by the bridge for the South Side people.
Okay.
And then there was one right across from, which was our high school in those days, but now it's the Lawrence M. Kale School.
Right, where the
Where
parking, lot is.
is. Yeah.
Right. And now, of course, there's one at the town hall, and there's something like that up at the Kentine Field, or at least there's a monument there.
Right.
Jimmy, you grew up on the south side. What was your experience with as a boy with Nanny Goat Hill?
Well, we used it as a shortcut going to school. What we would do is come across the bridge, enter the lower part of Kintine's mill,
The mill itself.
the mill itself.
Uh-huh.
They didn't bother us. They let us go up 2 flights of steps, and we'd walk all the way through the mill and come out at the very top by Dock Street.
Uh-huh.
And from Dock Street, of course, that's where Nanny Goat Hill was.
Yeah.
And we'd go up the top of Nanny Goat Hill and go over it and come out at the top of Montgomery Street. And we were on our way to St. Mary's School.
Every day the kids did that.
Every day. It was a shortcut, yeah. And in winter it was nice because we got nice and warm in Kintine's Mill,
Yeah.
particularly in this top spot where they used to call it the hot box, and it was hot.
Oh, okay.
That's where they coated the papers, and it
Right.
had to be hot.
Right. Yeah. The mill people were pretty friendly, or
They were
nice to-
great. Yeah, they welcomed us all in well.
Yeah.
And I think they were happy to see us. It sort of broke up the monotony probably for them a little bit, you know.
Did you ever fly a kite on Nanny Goat Hill?
No, I never did. Never did.
Ever,
But I know kids did.
You ever take a date up there?
I'm
Come
not
on
going to
now.
answer that one. But I don't want to lie, so I won't answer.
Let me run a few names by you and see who your response is. Let's see: Alberta Davis, Gene Davis, Frank Hughes. They lived up there.
Yeah.
They were older than you,
Yes.
but they were kind of Frank and Gene were kind of active boys in their day. Do you remember any stories of them with Nanny
Oh,
Goat Hill?
Gene was the milkman. Remember
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
for sure.
Uh-huh.
But
Did you do any sleigh riding up in that area?
no,
Okay.
we had our own areas on the south side.
Okay.
There weren't many cars in those days, particularly on the south side, so we had pretty much free reign.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks, Jimmy. It's been
Oh,
good
you're
talking
welcome.
to you.
Nice.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bernie.
Oh.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Oh,
I'm glad I made it.
Could you just hold that, let me bring this over here and let me hold that. Yeah, I want to get that little pin. You could bring that right up to the lens, yeah. Good.
Okay,
All right,
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Want to do it in here? Okay, I want to let you.
Okay, I thought you were going to take
Chair. Okay. All right. Come on, sit down now. Don't worry. Please like so